when I was, years ago, they will tell you, all these guys, they'll come to you with some sweet stories and tell you, this deal is so good to be true, you better put your signature, you better come in, otherwise you're going to lose, a big chunk of profits. And so they will pressure you on every side to give you the signature or to make you compromise. And this is what the world out there is. They will always make you compromise your ideals. They will always make you compromise so that you can break God's laws. But blessed are the people, despite all the pressure, they held on to God. They held on to God even if whatever the circumstances. So what happened here? The moment Saul offered the sacrifice, it was the beginning of his downfall. The moment he offered the sacrifice, Samuel walked in and Samuel said, "You have done foolishly." And that is the beginning of the end for Saul. So let's learn a lesson from this story of Saul. Let's learn a lesson that we will always be pressured by the world to compromise our principles, our ideals. And it will mostly come from the untoward generation. It will come from the people around you. And so we got to be careful that we do not give our hearts away easily, especially young people. The world will come knocking on your door. It will come in various forms of temptations, pressures, in many times, and also with dangling a carrot before you. And that's when you got to be very, very careful. So let's realize this pressure that we are going to be confronted. Let's read the second time that that Saul gave into disobeyed the commandment of God. Let's read now 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 1 to 34. One important thing you must understand here before we go on. 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse 1 to 15. You will find in this verse that we read, when Saul offered the sacrifice, Samuel came and the Philistine army was there. But you know what happened as you read the verse further? You will find that actually God helped the Israelites win the battle against the Philistines. When Samuel came, even though the sacrifice was offered by Saul and he lost God's favor, but yet if you read on further, you find that the Israelites fought against these Philistines and drove them away and defeated the Philistine army. What does it tell you? Even though that one king disobeyed, the king, but there were enough people in Israel who had the fear of God in them. There was enough people in Israel who really acknowledged God and feared God, and God fought the battles, not because of King Saul, who messed up, but he still was there to fight the battles of the nation of Israel. So similarly, in our families, we could be the ones who are sometimes praying. The rest of them are not there. Many of them in our families may have lost the fear of God, but we are still holding on to the fear of God. We are still praying for them. We are praying for for our family members. And because of the one person in the family or the two person in the family, God preserves the whole family. But when every one of them lost the fear of God, that's the time when the family will disintegrate. When everyone in the family really walks as they like, disobeys God, lose the fear of God, you will find the breakup of the family. But God sometimes chooses one person in a family or two to keep the family intact because we pray. And we keep that altar of praise and worship. So this is a principle that we need to understand today. Just because Saul messed up and lost the fear of God, God was mindful of his covenant with Israel. He fought the battles against the Philistines, gave them the victory. And so let's learn this important truth this morning. So let's go on to the second time when Saul disobeyed God. Let's read 1 Samuel 15, verse 1 to 34. 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 1 to 34. I will read for you. With your Bibles, let's start. 1 Samuel 15. Samuel said to Saul, I'm the one the Lord sent to anoint you king over his people Israel. So listen now to the message from the Lord. This is what the Lord Almighty says. I will punish the Amalekites for what they did to Israel when they waylaid them as they came up from Egypt. Now go attack the Amalekites and totally destroy everything that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men, women, children, infants, cattle, sheep, camels, and donkeys. Verse 4. So Saul summoned the men and mustered them at Telaim, 200,000 foot soldiers and 10,000 men from Judah. Saul went to the city of Amalek and set an ambush in the ravine. Then he said to the Kenites, go away, leave the Amalekites so that I do not destroy you along with them, for you showed kindness to all the Israelites when they came out of Egypt. So the Kenites moved away from the Amalekites. Then Saul attacked the Amalekites all the way from Havilah to Shur, to the east of Egypt. He took Agag, king of the Amalekites, alive, and all his people he totally destroyed with the sword. But Saul and the army spared Agag, and the best of the sheep and cattle, the fat calves and lambs, everything that was good. These they were unwilling to destroy completely, but everything that was despised and weak they totally destroyed. Verse 10. Then the word of the Lord came to Samuel, I am grieved that I have made Saul king, because he has turned away from me and has not carried out my instructions. Samuel was troubled, and he cried out to the Lord all that night. Verse 12. Early in the morning, Samuel got up and went to meet Saul, but he was told, Saul has gone to Carmel. There he has set up a monument in his own honor and has turned and gone on down to Gilgal. When Samuel reached him, Saul said, the Lord bless you. I have carried out the Lord's instructions. But Samuel said, what then is this bleating of sheep in my ears? What is this lowing of cattle that I hear? 15. Saul answered, the soldiers brought them from the Amalekites. They spared the best of the sheep and cattle to sacrifice to the Lord your God, but we totally destroyed the rest. Stop, Samuel said to Saul. Let me tell you what the Lord said to me last night. Tell me, Saul replied. 17. Samuel said, although you were once small in your own eyes, did you not become the head of the tribes of Israel? The Lord anointed you king over Israel, and he sent you on a mission saying, go and completely destroy those wicked people, the Amalekites, make war on them until you have wiped them out. Why did you not obey the Lord? Why did you not pounce on the plunder and do evil in the eyes of the Lord? Verse 20. But I did obey the Lord, Saul said. I went on the mission the Lord assigned me. I completely destroyed the Amalekites and brought back Agag, their king. The soldiers took sheep and cattle from the plunder, the best of what was devoted to God, in order to sacrifice them to the Lord your God. But Samuel replied, does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices, as much as in obeying the voice of the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams. For rebellion is like the sin of divination, and arrogancy like the evil of idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he hath rejected you as king. Then Saul said to Samuel, I have sinned. I violated the Lord's command and your instructions. I was afraid of the people, so I gave in to them. Now I beg you, forgive my sin and come back with me so that I may worship the Lord. But Samuel said to him, I will not go back. I will not go back with you. You have rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord has rejected you as king over Israel. Verse 27. As Samuel turned to leave, Saul caught hold of the helm of his robe and tore it. Samuel said to him, the Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today and has given it to one of your neighbors, to one better than you. He who is the glory of Israel does not lie or change his mind, for he is not a man that he should change his mind. Samuel replied, I have sinned, but please honor me before the elders of my people and before Israel. Come back with me so that I may worship the Lord your God. So Samuel went back with Saul, and Saul worshipped the Lord. Then Samuel said, bring me Agag, king of the Amalekites. Agag came to him confidently, thinking, surely the bitterness of death is past. But Samuel said, as your sword has made woman childless, so will your mother be childless among women. And Samuel put Agag to death before the Lord at Gilgal. Then Samuel left for Ramah, but Saul went up to his home in Gibeah to Saul. Until the day Samuel died, he did not go to see Saul again, though Samuel mourned for him, and the Lord was grieved that he had made Saul king over Israel. So here we find the next problem, the next thing that completely destroyed Saul. Again, it was an instruction that God gave to Saul through Samuel that he was supposed to kill all the Amalekites, not every one of them, not sparing even the sheep and the oxen. He said, just make, what was God's plan? He wanted to destroy Amalekites and take them as a race from the face of the earth. That was the judgment that God gave to Moses in the wilderness. He said, the Amalekites will be taken away from them in the memory of the world, in the history of the world. That was God's plan to Moses, but Saul did not fulfill it. Why? Because Saul said, hey, how can I destroy such profit? The best of the sheep, the oxen, there was so much good things, treasures that he couldn't make himself to destroy. So when Samuel came and said, did you do the commandment of the Lord? He said, yes, but I took all the best so that I can offer it to the Lord as a sacrifice. And the other thing that we can learn from here is, let's read verse 17 in this chapter we just read, 1 Samuel 15:17. Samuel said, although you were once small in your own eyes, did you not become the head of the tribes of Israel? Why God made Saul, gave him promotion? Because Saul did not look of himself as great. He was small in his eyes. But what happened to Saul eventually when he became the king? Let's read verse 12. Let's read verse 12 in the same chapter. Early in the morning, Samuel got up and went to meet Saul, but he was told, Saul has gone to Carmel. There he has set up a monument in his own honor and has turned and gone on down to Gilgal. So here, when Saul was nobody in his eyes, God promoted him as king. But here what do we see him doing? Not only he disobeyed God's commandment, he was building a monument for his glory in Israel. He was building like, Nebuchadnezzar. He built a statue in honor of him and told everybody to worship him. So here Saul was building that statue, that ornament, that monument, the monument for his glory, not for God's glory. So we can see how the downfall came. When you lose the fear of God, this is an important truth. When you lose the fear of God, you will build you will build everything for your glory. Your pride and your ego will come sky high. That is when you lose the fear of God. Then you will be doing everything not for God's glory, for your glory. That is the tragedy today in Christian circles. Many people are in ministry trying to build not God's kingdom. They're trying to promote themselves. Many servants of God, or people of God, I know over the years that I've observed, they start out trying to build their kingdom, trying to build whose kingdom? God's kingdom. They were nobody, Some of them were nobody. They were ground zero. But they came to God. God blessed them and blessed them. They were little in their eyes. But later on, what happened? They started building their own kingdom. That's the tragedy. That is the what do you call that? That is the thing we need to be careful of even in ministry in God's kingdom. We need to be careful that we will build everything according to the pattern that God assured us in Mount Zion. So this is the problem with Saul. He started, when he lost the fear of God, he was promoting himself until the downfall came when he disobeyed God. So we got to understand this important truth. What did Saul tell to Samuel? He said, I took all this these valuable things from the Amalekites, the sheep, the goats, the best of them, that I might sacrifice to God and devote it to God. That's what he said in the verse that we just read. Now let's see the difference between Saul and the second king of Israel. Now, if you know your Bibles well, who was the second king of Israel? See, we'll see the difference between Saul and his sacrifice, and David and his sacrifice that David gave to God. And let's read that. Wait, just read that. Or somebody can read it for me. No mind, I'll read it for you. First Chronicles chapter 21 verse 18 to 30. First Chronicles chapter 21, 18 to 30. We got it, I will read them. Then the angel of the Lord ordered Gad to tell David to go up and build an altar to the Lord on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. So David went up in obedience to the word that Gad had spoken in the name of the Lord. While Araunah was threshing wheat, he turned and saw the angel. His 4 sons who were with him hid themselves. Then David approached, and when Araunah looked at and saw him, he left the threshing floor and bowed down before David with his face to the ground. Verse 22. David said to him, "Let me have the site of your threshing floor, so I can build an altar to the Lord, that the plague on the people may be stopped. Sell it to me at a full price." Verse 23. Araunah said to David, "Take it, let my lord the king do whatever pleases him. Look, I will give the oxen for the burnt offerings, the threshing sledges for the wood, and the wheat for the grain offering. I will give all this." 24. But King David replied to Araunah, "No, I insist on paying the full price. I will not take for the Lord what is yours, or sacrifice a burnt offering that costs me nothing." So David paid Araunah 600 shekels of gold for the site. David built an altar to the Lord there and sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. He called on the Lord, and the Lord answered him with fire from heaven on the altar of burnt offering. Verse 27, Then the Lord spoke to the angel, and he put his sword back in its sheath. At that time, when David saw that the Lord had answered him on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite, he offered sacrifices there. The tabernacle of the Lord, which Moses had made in the desert, and the altar of burnt offering were at that time on the high place at Gibeon. But David could not go before it to inquire of the Lord, because he was afraid of the sword of the angel. So here, we see 2 people offering a sacrifice. One was King Saul. The sacrifice that King Saul offered to God did not cost him anything. He stole it from the Amalekites. He stole the best of their sheep and their oxen from the Amalekites, and he wanted to give it to God. But here we find David, when he came to the threshing floor of Araunah, when Araunah, the man, the farmer saw him, he saw the king coming to this humble man's house. You know, if the king can come in front of your gate, what will you do? All your neighbors, everybody wondering, who is this guy, VVIP coming in front of your gate? And the king came to Araunah's house, to his place, and he said, Araunah was taken back, the king being there. And the king said, "I want to offer a sacrifice at your threshing floor." And Araunah said, yes, you can have all the threshing floor, the sheep, the oxen, I will give it all to you. Please, by all means, have it all free. But what did David say? David told him,